Hello, welcome to this short video, Acrylamide in Food. My name's Andy Bowles and I'm a food lawyer. Now this is the 41st in 100 videos that I'm recording. These are 100 videos on UK food law topics. Now you may be watching this as part of our online training service, in which case there is an hour-long webinar that can go with this video, so you can go and have a watch that. You can also download additional reference materials. But you may be watching this on our YouTube channel, which of course is fine. Right, start at the beginning. What is acrylamide? Acrylamide is a process contaminant. What does that mean? Well, basically, as well, I'll run through in a moment. Acrylamide is formed in food, in certain foods, by applying certain processes. I mean, basically what I'm saying here is where you've got high starch foods being subjected to high temperatures, then this process acrylamide, a contaminant acrylamide, can be formed in the food. So why is it there? Well, acrylamide is formed by the Maillard reaction. Now that's a reaction between amino acids and sugars in food, and it happens, as I say, in high starch content foods when they're actually cooked at high temperatures. So things like frying, roasting and baking can cause this. It's not a contaminant that's added, it is a natural byproduct of the cooking process. So basically what the law does here, and we'll come on to that in a moment, it requires that food businesses put in place what they call mitigating factors, some sort of steps to try and reduce the production of acrylamide through the high temperature baking, frying, or cooking of high starch products. So the Maillard reaction, you may have come across it before. That's basically a reaction that causes browning in food. So it's a desirable characteristic in many foods. Of course, it's desirable in chips. You want them nicely browned. In things like high food sort of crisps and things like that, you want them nicely browned. So the Maillard reaction is a desirable thing, but it is a reaction that needs to be properly controlled. Maillard reaction also occurs not just in food, but when you actually puff on a cigarette. That's when acrylamide is also produced in a similar way. So duration and temperature of cooking are key. The higher the temperature that a food is cooked at for longer, the more likelihood you're going to get acrylamide being formed in the food. If you can reduce the cooking time at lower temperatures, then you'll get lower levels of acrylamide. So there's a first clue on a mitigating factor. What are the risks? Well, actually, the risks are not clear and not 100% established. Because we know about acrylamide being present in cigarette smoke, it's one of the factors that makes cigarettes dangerous. Not the only factor, of course, but one of many. We have got lots of data on exposure to acrylamide in a sort of industrial setting. So where you've got workers handling acrylamide, there has been demonstrated cases of neurotoxicity and nerve damage. But this is when they're handling chemicals that contain acrylamide. What about acrylamide in food? Well, there is a possibility, bordering on probability, that it may be similarly dangerous, but there is no confirmation, no absolute proof. So the law does not set out absolute standards that must be followed. What the law does, it pushes food business operators into achieving what's known as low as reasonably achievable levels of acrylamide by using good practice techniques. And that's the heart of the legislation. So we have a regulation there. It says in there that the whole point in the title of the regulation is called Establishing Mitigation Measures and Benchmark Levels for the Reduction of the Presence of Acrylamide in Food. Just to summarise the regs, and there is, as I say, a separate webinar for this if you subscribe to our online training service. I'll go into a lot more detail. But food business operators must apply these mitigation measures with respect to specified foods. It's not all foods. It's only one set out in the law. It lists out literally the actual foods that this applies to. Now, different businesses will have to do things at different levels. If you're a corner chip shop, the level of mitigation that you put in place will be much less than, say, your McDonald's, because clearly the size of the business, the exposure of products is different. To achieve appropriate levels of low levels of acrylamide, we're not looking at eradication, as I said. It's about getting as low as reasonably achievable levels. And what they do in the law is they don't set maximum levels, they set benchmark. They say, well, look, the average chip shop should be able to do this. The average maker of crisps should be able to do this. So what you do is you put in place measures to actually achieve the benchmark levels. For larger businesses, there is a requirement for sampling of products. It's not required for smaller businesses. And also for larger businesses, if you're performing sampling and you find high levels of acrylamide, well, then there are remediation measures that will need to be taken. So that's basically what it is. So let's give an example. I mentioned a chip shop. So let's just have a high street chip shop cooking chips. What can a chip shop do in terms of mitigation measures? Well, I said that the acrylamide is going to be formed in high starch foods when they're cooked at high temperatures for a long time. So the Maillard reaction is dependent on the sugar content of the food. There are varieties of potato that have lower sugar content. So as a chip shop owner, you can go to your suppliers and say, look, I want a lower sugar content potato. So that will actually be your first mitigating factor. So when you cook your chips, you're going to likely get lower acrylamide levels. Also, acrylamide can be formed, what they call the precursors, the chemicals that form acrylamide can form at refrigerated temperatures in starchy foods. So potatoes should be stored above 6 degrees centigrade. This is the raw potatoes. Before frying, try and get rid of some of the starch. So basically soak 30 minutes to 2 hours in cold water, or it can be for a few minutes in warm water, or blanch, drop them into hot water, boiling water, just for a moment. Depending on, obviously, chip shop owners will be looking at this and saying, well, it's all very well, but our chips have got to look right and taste right at the end. So there are lots of different variations here, depending on your end products. You may need to experiment to see which works best for you. And that's not the only mitigating measures, there are others. When frying, use oils which allow quick frying time and lower temperatures. So again, speak to suppliers about using appropriate frying oils. Frying temperatures should be below 175 degrees centigrade. So it's about setting your equipment, but making sure your equipment is properly maintained. But, if you can get away with lower, as long as you don't drop your temperatures too low that when you put other foods in, your chicken nuggets or something, they're not cooked. Make sure you get the balance right. Of course, you've got to have a regard to food safety, making sure your foods are cooked. But you want to make sure that the foods are of the right texture, the right appearance, the right, that they feel right to the consumer, but you've taken these measures to reduce the acrylamide. Skim the fat regularly to remove crumbs, because the crumbs might be getting overcooked and might be increasing the acrylamide levels. And use colour guides. And there are colour guides available where you can look at a chip and decide whether that is an overcooked chip or a properly cooked chip. Okay, that last one you probably wouldn't need if you've been doing it for a few years. Anyway, look, that's acrylamide in food. It's a process contaminant. Thank you for listening to that video. This is one out of 100 videos that I'm putting together, so please join me on the next one. Thank you for listening.